Okay, today is 27th of July, and we continue with the Nidana-samyutta. Hope to finish it tonight. Chapter 12.61. As have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park, and he said, "Monks, the uninstructed worldling, Puthujjana, might experience revulsion towards this body, composed of the four great elements. He might become dispassionate towards it and be liberated from it. For what reason? Because growth and decline is seen in this body composed of the four great elements. It is seen being taken up and laid aside. Therefore, the uninstructed worldling might experience revulsion towards this body composed of the four great elements. He might become dispassionate towards it and be liberated from it." Let's stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying, even an ordinary person, a worldling, Puthujjana, he might experience revulsion, dispassion towards this body, because he can see that this body, after it grows, then it will decline, it will age. So that's why even an ordinary person can see this and become dispassionate towards it. But monks, as to that which is called mind and mentality and consciousness, the uninstructed worldling is unable to experience revulsion towards it, unable to become dispassionate towards it and be liberated from it. For what reason? Because for a long time this has been held to by him, appropriated and grasped thus: "This is mine, this I am, this is myself." Therefore, the uninstructed worldling is unable to experience revulsion towards it, unable to become dispassionate towards it, and be liberated from it. Stop there for a moment. This one, that which is called mind and mentality and consciousness, the Pali word is citta, mano, and vijnana. So here the Buddha says, it's very difficult for an ordinary person to be dispassionate towards the mind. These three terms indicate the mind in its various ways of working. The mentality, mano, here is more of the thinking faculty. The consciousness is more of the consciousness of the six sense doors. And the Buddha says because for a long time an ordinary person has grasped, is attached to the mind as this is mine, this I am, this is myself. You see, this mind, our mind is our self-defense system, our ego support system. Because we have the mind, the mind is what supports our ego, because we protect ourselves by using the mind. Whenever there's any danger, we use our mind. So when we want anything, we use our mind. You want to achieve success, so you have to use your mind a lot. So all the time we are using our mind. So it's very difficult to let go of this mind. And the Buddha continued, "It would be better, monks, for the uninstructed worldling to take as self this body composed of the four great elements rather than the mind. For what reason? Because this body composed of the four great elements is seen standing for 1 year, for 2 years, for 3, 4, 5, or 10 years, or 20, 30, 40, or 50 years, for 100 years, or even longer. But that which is called mind and mentality and consciousness arises as one thing and ceases as another, by day and by night. Just as a monkey roaming through a forest grabs hold of one branch, lets that go and grabs another, then lets that go and grabs still another. So too, that which is called mind and mentality and consciousness arises as one thing and ceases as another, by day and by night." Stop here for a moment. So here, the Buddha is saying that an ordinary person there will be more reason to take this body as the self rather than to take the mind. But the ordinary person takes the mind more to be the self rather than the body, because he sees the body can grow old, can sicken, can die. But the Buddha says, in actual fact, he should take the body more to be the self rather than the mind. Why? Because the mind actually also changes, just like age and die, and even much faster. The Buddha says, whereas the body can last 100 years or even more, but the mind is changing all the time. Day and night it is changing, and changing so fast. Just like the monkey grabbing a branch and let go and grab another branch. So also the mind, in fact there's nothing faster than the mind. Nothing works faster than the mind. So even in 1 second, the mind can be so active within 1 second. So it's changing all the time. It's grabbing one object and letting go and grab another mental object and let go and grab another mental object. That's why like a monkey. So the Buddha says actually the mind, because it's changing much faster, although we don't see it, we think the mind is a stream of continuous consciousness, never stopping. But actually the mind arises and passes away, arises and passes away, arises and passes away. Within 1 second itself, I don't know how many times it arises and passes away. So that being so, the Buddha is saying the mind is even more impermanent than the body, whereas the body can last 100 over years, and yet the mind cannot last even 1 second. Therein monks, the instructed noble disciple attends closely and carefully to dependent origination itself thus. When this exists, that comes to be. With the rising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. That is, with ignorance as condition, volition comes to be. With volition as condition, consciousness, etc. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. But with the remainderless fading away and cessation of ignorance comes cessation of volition. With the cessation of volition, cessation of consciousness, etc. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. Seeing thus monks, the instructed noble disciple experiences revulsion towards form, revulsion towards feeling, revulsion towards perception, revulsion towards volition, revulsion towards consciousness. Experiencing revulsion, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge it is liberated. He understands, destroyed his birth, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more for this state of being. So towards the end, the Buddha says, the learned Aryan disciple, having understood dependent origination, that everything arises and ceases through conditions, then he feels dispassion towards 5 aggregates, namely form or body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness. These 5 things, these 5 aggregates also can be said to be body and mind, because we always take the body and mind to be the self, or as belonging to the self, or the self in the 5 aggregates, or the 5 aggregates in the self. So when he understands that the body and the mind is all conditionally arisen, then he experiences dispassion and revulsion, and so his mind becomes liberated. So this sutta, the main point about this sutta is that although because we can see the body ages and sickens and dies, so it is easier to let go of the body rather than the mind. But the Buddha says in actual fact there is more reason to let go of the mind rather than the body, because the mind, at least the body stands longer than the mind. But you see, when a person becomes first stage Arya, when a person enters the stream, and then after that he becomes first fruit Arya, Sotapanna. The Sotapanna eliminates 3 factors: attachment to rules and vows or rituals, and then attachment, identity view, Sakaya Ditti, and doubt. Now, this Sakaya Ditti If a person eliminates Sakaya Ditti, identity view, it means he sees that the body and the self is not, there's no self, there's no permanent, there's nothing permanent in the body and the mind, the five aggregates. Yet he still has a self. So this self, where is that self? It's somewhere in the mind. So he doesn't really understand where it is. So when a person becomes an Arya, but not yet Arahant, so he has let go of this body and the mind. He sees that the body and the mind is not the self, and yet he still has this self somewhere. 12.63 at Savatthi, Buddha said, monks, there are these four kinds of nutriment for the maintenance of beings that have already come to be, and for the assistance of those about to come to be. But for the nutriment, edible food, gross or subtle. Second, contact. Third, volition. Fourth, consciousness. These are the four kinds of nutriment for the maintenance of beings that have already come to be, and for the assistance of those about to come to be. And how, monks, should the nutriment, edible food be seen? Suppose a couple, husband and wife, had taken limited provisions and were travelling through a desert. They have with them their only son, dear and beloved. Then, in the middle of the desert, their limited provisions would be used up and exhausted, while the rest of the desert remains to be crossed. The husband and wife would think, our limited provisions have been used up and exhausted, while the rest of this desert remains to be crossed. Let us kill our only son, dear and beloved, and prepare dried and spiced meat. By eating our son's flesh, we can cross the rest of this desert. Let not all three of us perish. Then, monks, the husband and wife would kill their only son, dear and beloved, prepare dried and spiced meat, and by eating their son's flesh, they would cross the rest of the desert. While they are eating their son's flesh, they would beat their breasts and cry, where are you, our only son? Where are you, our only son? What do you think, monks? Would they eat that food for amusement or for enjoyment, or for the sake of physical beauty and attractiveness? No, Venerable Sir. Wouldn't they eat that food only for the sake of crossing the desert? Yes, Venerable Sir. It is in such a way, monks, that I say the nutriment edible food should be seen. When the nutriment edible food is fully understood, lust for the five chords of sensual pleasure is fully understood. When lust for the five chords of sensual pleasure is fully understood, there is no fetter bound by which a noble disciple might come back again to this world. I stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says we should consider the food we eat as though being the flesh of our only son. And then we won't be greedy for tasty food. That can be understood by thinking whether the food, whether we eat is meat or even vegetables, it still is at the expense of some beings. Some beings have to die for us to survive. So if we eat meat, that is seen more clearly. But if we eat vegetarian food, still other beings have to die for it, because the farmers who plant the crops, they will naturally kill all the pests that destroy their crops, like in Malaysia you have monkeys and squirrels and rats, and in other countries maybe rabbits and kangaroos and smaller creatures like worms, caterpillars, insects, etc. So whatever we eat is always at the expense of other beings. So if we consider that, we should not be greedy for good food. Just see that we have to consume the food to survive. And our purpose of survival, we should have a purpose. There's no point if we survive at the expense of other living beings and waste our life. So in this case, this husband and wife, they have to cross the desert. And this is an analogy for the sea, the desert of samsara. If we want to cross the desert of samsara, we have to survive and live the holy life, practice the Dhamma to get out of samsara. So the Buddha says food should be considered in that way. We owe a debt to others, other beings that we have to eat at the expense of their lives. So if we consider like that, then we are not greedy. And then also we make good use of our life to benefit ourselves and to benefit others. Not live our life aimlessly. A lot of people, because they don't understand the Dhamma, they live their life aimlessly and they never get out of samsara. Not to get out of samsara is not so bad. The only problem is they'll be falling to the woeful plains again and again to suffer. So the Buddha says when you have understood the nutriment, edible food in this way, then the lust for the sensual pleasure, you will not, you will reduce your lust for sensual pleasure because you know the longer we live and enjoy life, the more we hurt others. This, as they say, is a dog-eat-dog world. Each person survives at the expense of others. And how among should the nutriment contact be seen? Suppose there is a flayed cow. That means a skin cow, a cow with the skin removed. If she stands exposed to a wall, the creatures dwelling in the wall would nibble at her. If she stands exposed to a tree, the creatures dwelling in the tree would nibble at her. If she stands exposed to water, the creatures dwelling in the water would nibble at her. If she stands exposed to the open air, the creatures in the open air would nibble at her. Whatever that flayed cow stands exposed to, the creatures there would nibble at her. It is in such a way, monks, that I say the nutriment contact should be seen. When the nutriment contact is fully understood, the three kinds of feeling are fully understood. When the three kinds of feeling are fully understood, I say there is nothing further that a noble disciple needs to do. Let's stop here for a moment. This cow is a cow with the skin removed. So if the skin is removed, the flesh, other creatures will like to bite the flesh, to eat the flesh. So whether she is standing touching a wall, when she stands touching a wall, then the creatures in the wall would bite her. If she stands against a tree, creatures in the tree would bite her. If she stands in the water, creatures in the water would bite her. In the open air, creatures in the open air would bite her. This refers to our six sense bases. At the six sense bases, contact means contact with external sense object. That means for the eye, is forms. Forms will make contact with us. Sounds will make contact. Smells, taste, touch, and thoughts would make contact. And when it makes contact, then feeling arises. This feeling can be pleasant, can be unpleasant, can be neutral. But when the unpleasant feeling arises, then we feel pain. So each time unpleasant feeling arises, we feel pain. So in the same way, just like the contact touching us gives rise to painful feelings. So this cow with the skin removed, every time the little creatures come into contact with her body, and then she feels pain. So then the Buddha says that is how we should understand contact. So you see, this contact comes at the six sense doors. Okay, and these six sense doors, whenever the six sense consciousness arises, the world arises. So the world at the six senses always gives us pleasant and unpleasant feelings, and neutral feelings. The pleasant feelings, however much we experience, is never enough. But when the unpleasant feelings arise, we cannot stand. Okay, so that's why the world is called a world of suffering. Samsara is a world of suffering. So a liberated person, the Arahant, does not like to dwell in the world of the six senses, in the world of the six consciousness. An Arahant, if you look into the suttas, after they have become liberated, they constantly, every day, abide in jhana. When a monk abides in jhana, it goes into his mind. He withdraws from the world of the six senses. Because the world of the six senses is an unpleasant world. It's a world of suffering. So Arhan constantly abides in his mind. So there are some people who don't understand. They say monks who like to abide in jhana, not seeing reality, running away from reality, trying to, just like some people renounce, and people who don't understand, worldly people say, this person renounced to become a monk, is running away from reality, not facing the world and all that. It's rubbish, because the world is not a pleasant place at all. That's why the Buddha says, even to exist for a moment more, he doesn't want. The Buddha says, the world to him is like shit, excrement is stated in the suttas. So a wise man will go back into our mind. That is our original home, as Ajahn Chah says, going back to our original home. And how, monks, should the nutriment mental volition be seen? Suppose there is a charcoal pit deeper than a man's height, filled with glowing coals without flame or smoke. A man would come along wanting to live, not wanting to die, desiring happiness and averse to suffering. Then two strong men would grab him by both arms and drag him towards the charcoal pit. The man's volition would be to get away. His longing would be to get away. His wish would be to get away, to get far away from the charcoal pit. For what reason? Because he knows, I will fall into this charcoal pit, and on that account I will meet death or deadly suffering. It is in such a way, monks, that I say the nutriment mental volition to be seen, should be seen. When the nutriment mental volition is fully understood, the three kinds of craving are fully understood. When the three kinds of craving are fully understood, I say there is nothing further that a noble disciple needs to do. I stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying, because of mental volition, whenever we exercise mental volition can be exercised in various ways. Like we desire to do this, desire not to do that. In a way, when we exercise our mental volition, that is creating karma. And also, when we crave for something, there's also mental volition. Crave for sensual pleasure, we crave for existence, or we crave for non-existence, or the will to live. We have a strong will to live. That is also mental volition. But basically, the Buddha says, like this man falling into that pit. Falling into that pit means falling into samsara, falling into the round of rebirths. Once you fall into the round of rebirths, you will suffer and or die. But it's a continuous process. You suffer and die, suffer and die, suffer and die. Each time, every lifetime. So that the Buddha says we should see, because of our mental volition, that we are dragged into the round of rebirths. But in the Buddha's teachings, the Buddha says that the round of rebirths is primarily due to craving. So you can see that the mental volition is connected with craving. And the Buddha always mentions three types of craving. Craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, which is also the will to live, and craving for non-existence. So when you understand the nutriment mental volition in this way, then the three kinds of craving are understood. So we have to let go of this mental volition, basically the craving, the various types of craving. Then only we don't fall into that pit, that burning pit of rebirth. And how, monks, should the nutriment consciousness be seen? Suppose they were to arrest a bandit, a criminal, and bring him before the king, saying, Sire, this man is a bandit, a criminal. Impose on him whatever punishment you wish. The king says to them, Go, men, in the morning strike this man with 100 spears. In the morning they strike him with 100 spears. Then at noon the king asks, Men, how's that man? Still alive, sire. Then go at noon and strike him with 100 spears. At noon they strike him with 100 spears. Then in the evening the king asks, "Man, how's that man?" "Still alive, sire." And he says, "Then go and in the evening strike him with 100 spears." In the evening they strike him with 100 spears. What do you think, monks? Would that man, being struck with 300 spears, experience pain and displeasure on that account? Venerable Sir, even if he was struck with 1 spear, he would experience pain and displeasure on that account, not to speak of 300 spears. And the Buddha said, "It is in such a way, monks, that I say the Newtoman consciousness should be seen. When the Newtoman consciousness is fully understood, name and form is fully understood. When name and form is fully understood, I say there is nothing further that a noble disciple needs to do." And that's the end of the sutta. So here finally, the simile for the Newtoman consciousness is like a criminal being struck with 300 spears each day. So my interpretation is that like the embryo, the consciousness descends into that embryo, and then this being starts. So when he is conscious, the consciousness strikes him like this man being struck with the 300 spears. Every time he is conscious in the womb, he experiences pain, and consciousness is always conscious of nama-rupa, mentality, materiality. So that's why when you understand consciousness, you will understand nama-rupa, mentality and materiality. But let me see what the commentary says about this. 168. Commentary says, the king represents karma, the criminal, the worldling, the 300 spears, the rebirth consciousness. The time the king gives his command is like the time the worldling is driven towards rebirth by King Karma. Pain from being struck by the spears is like the resultant suffering in the course of existence once rebirth has taken place. So it's a bit similar when the rebirth consciousness goes into the embryo. So once he's that being in the embryo, once he's come alive, then the consciousness is painful to him. So because that being in the embryo is like half alive, like this man, this criminal struck by the 100 spears each time, he's already half dead. So in the same way, the embryo is half dead, half alive. So every time the consciousness comes to him, it's like being struck with spears. So that's the sutta. Now 12.64, that's Savati. Monks, there are these 4 kinds of nutriment for the maintenance of beings that have already come to be and for the assistance of those about to come to be. What for? The nutriment, edible food, gross or subtle. Second, contact. Third, mental volition or volition. Fourth, consciousness. These are the 4 kinds of nutriment for the maintenance of beings that have already come to be and for the assistance of those about to come to be. If monks, there is lust for the nutriment edible food, if there is delight, if there is craving, consciousness becomes established and comes to growth. Wherever consciousness becomes established and comes to growth, there is a descent of name and form, or nama-rupa, mentality, materiality. Where there is a descent of mentality and materiality, there is the growth of volition. Where there is the growth of volition, there is the production of future renewed existence. Where there is the production of future renewed existence, there is future birth, aging and death. Where there is future birth, aging and death, I say that it is accompanied by sorrow, anguish and despair. Similarly, if there is lust for the nutriment contact, or for the nutriment mental volition, or for the nutriment consciousness, if there is delight, if there is craving, consciousness becomes established and comes to growth. Wherever consciousness becomes established and comes to growth, I say that it is accompanied by sorrow, anguish and despair. Suppose monks, an artist or a painter, using dye or lac or turmeric or indigo or crimson, would create the figure of a man or a woman complete in all its features on a well-polished plank or wall or canvas. So too, if there is lust for the nutriment edible food, or for the nutriment contact, or for the nutriment mental volition, or for the nutriment consciousness, If there is delight, if there is craving, consciousness becomes established there and comes to growth. Wherever consciousness becomes established and comes to growth, I say that it is accompanied by sorrow, anguish and despair. If monks, there is no lust for the nutriment edible food, or for the nutriment contact, or for the nutriment mental volition, or for the nutriment consciousness, if there is no delight, if there is no craving, consciousness does not become established there and come to growth. Where consciousness does not become established and come to growth, there is no descent of mentality, materiality. Where there is no descent of mentality and materiality, there is no growth of volition. Where there is no growth of volition, there is no production of future renewed existence. Where there is no production of future renewed existence, there is no future birth, aging and death. Where there is no future birth, aging and death, I say that it is without sorrow, anguish and despair. Suppose monks, there was a house or a wall or a hall with a peaked roof with windows on the northern, southern and eastern sides. When the sun rises and a beam of light enters through a window, where would it become established? On the western wall, Venerable Sir. If there were no western wall, where would it become established? On the earth, Venerable Sir. If there were no earth, where would it become established? On the water, Venerable Sir. If there were no water, where would it become established? It would not become established anywhere, Venerable Sir. So too monks, if there is no lust for the nutriment edible food, for the nutriment contact, for the nutriment mental volition, for the nutriment consciousness, consciousness does not become established there and come to growth. Where consciousness does not become established and come to growth, I say that it is without sorrow, anguish and despair. It's the end of the sutta. Earlier we read a sutta saying that if there is planning to do this and do that, or there is a tendency towards something, then the consciousness will be maintained. So it also says if there is no planning and desire, but there is still a tendency, then consciousness will also continue, be maintained. So here in this case, this lust for the nutriments, the various types of nutriments, will prolong existence, prolong life. So if there is no lust for the various nutriments, as there is no condition for consciousness to become established, just like this beam of light, if there is no wall for it, no floor for it to become established, it would not become established anywhere.